Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest everything Telltale games, Transformers, and more. Now, for today's review, we are finally going to bring an end to the Quintesson arc of Transformers Cyberverse Season 3 with episodes 14 through 17, the End of the Universe parts 1 through 4. And honestly, compared to the Battle for Cybertron, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I do think the Battle for Cybertron was a stronger 4-episode arc, but honestly, and while this arc, the End of the Universe arc, does have some low points, the ending absolutely nails it and is a really satisfying ending. So overall, I am satisfied with this, but there are some few things throughout all these 4 episodes that do bother me a bit. So we're going to go ahead and see everything these episodes did right and what they did wrong, starting with episode 14, the End of the Universe part 1. So the way the End of the Universe arc starts off, and this is something that will happen for the next 3 episodes as well, is that at random points throughout this episode, episodes 1 through 3 of this arc, plus just random parts throughout the episodes and even episode 4, all start with, like, basically this, it's apparently, like, Cup narrating to the audience, or maybe some new Autobot recruits. I'm not exactly sure the context of this, but it seems like it's just Cup narrating to the audience, breaking the fourth wall, essentially, of basically summarizing the events. He's telling the whole story of the End of the Universe event as if they're all flashbacks, and I gotta say, the way they're doing this for such a big arc, I'm not exactly fond of this, honestly. I mean, I don't mind that they're doing that Cup is narrating this. I just think, why do this for such a big arc like the End of the Universe? Why not do this for maybe, like, a smaller arc, or even just like a one standalone filler episode? Why does this have to, what felt the need for this? Because it doesn't really seem like there's any reason for why this should exist. It really just feels, and it just, there's some points that are like, Cup shouldn't know some things that happened unless, like, I guess, Optimus or some other Autobots or Decepticons told him what happened. It just doesn't make sense in my opinion, and it's just one problem I have with just all 4 of these episodes as a whole. But anyway, episode 14, the End of the Universe part 1, after that starts off with a little flashback explaining how Starscream became the Quintesson judge. And basically, after the events of Ghost Town, he and Croatan were heading towards the Quintesson ship in deep space to try and get back at it for all the Quintessons killing everyone inside, or abducting everyone inside Croatan, as we saw back in Ghost Town. However, when they arrive at the the Quintesson ship, Croatan is defeated almost instantly, and Starscream is taken captive by the judge. So the judge deems that Starscream is guilty and should be sentenced to the loop, but Starscream tries to make a deal with the judge, stating that he can be useful by revealing that the Allspark is on Cybertron and will be a great energy source for the Quintessons. So the Quintesson judge decides to spare Starscream and instead tells him to head downstairs to the scientist lab, where he turns him into the judge, as we saw back in the end of last episode, the judge. So then it cuts back to the present, or I guess you could say the past, considering this whole story is being a story told by Cup in the present. But anyway, the main part of the story, I should say, cuts back to where the judge left off, with Starscream now as the Quintesson judge, just attacking everyone. And it's really crazy to see just how powerful Starscream has become to this point, where he's pretty much, like, back to the same level of power he was during I Am the Allspark. And it's great to see after I Am the Allspark just fumbled, how all-powerful Starscream was in that episode, but just made him so defeatable by a Deus Ex Machina. This made it so much better, in my opinion. So Starscream basically takes out all the Autobots and Decepticons with ease, and rounds them all up into this big holding facility in this big stadium. However, while they're doing this, Starscream is told by the scientist that he needs to now judge the universe and deliver whether they're guilty of being destroyed or not. But Starscream's unsure of how to do this, so basically the scientist puts up this tutorial video recorded by the old judge that states when a universe is found guilty, they open a portal to Unspace and have basically Unspace consume that universe. And so Starscream, though, is still hesitant on actually destroying the universe so far, because he wants to see Optimus and Megatron there pay for like abusing and torturing him throughout for many years in the past 2 seasons. So while this is happening, Hot Rod, Soundwave, and all the other Autobots are trying to think of a way to escape, when Hot Rod and Soundwave make a little escape attempt with all the other Autobots and Decepticons. It doesn't go just exactly as planned when Soundwave tries to do a break Soundwave in efforts to a break out. While it stuns Starscream and all the Destructicons for a bit, they do eventually get the upper hand on them and end up destroying Soundwave's speakers, so he can't try it again. But while he's doing this, Windblade did manage to escape and head towards McAdams, which we'll see her story continue in episode 15, part 2. So, but anyway, though, as punishment for trying to escape, Starscream puts Hot Rod and Soundwave back into the loop, but instead of the loop being the parade again, because thank God I didn't want to deal with the parade anymore, we are taken into this weird white room where Hot Rod and Soundwave are essentially stuck in a room that constantly is full of the Plague of Rust, which we saw back in episode 12 or episode 8 of season 1, Terminal Velocity, where it was basically brought up board by Decepticon Suicide Bomber to destroy Velocitron. We saw that's how Blur died as well. So Hot Rod and Soundwave are only armed with one buffer each, as they're forced to buff out the whole room to make sure they're not killed by a Plague of Rust. But now here's what I'm wondering: if this is just a loop, isn't this essentially the equivalent of some sort of genjutsu from Naruto, that really they're not being actually in any danger here? They're just, maybe the pain will be simulated, which I guess in that point, yeah, you want to avoid the imaginary pain, but still, it kind of makes the stakes feel a little less severe in my opinion. But anyway, after Hot Rod and Soundwave were put into a loop, Starscream again demands that Optimus and Megatron reveal themselves so that they can be punished and then die along with the rest of the Autobots. But I think it's RC or Perceptor who ends up telling Starscream that Optimus died in the Quintesson Tower alongside Megatron, Bumblebee, and everyone else. And I totally forgot to mention this back in my review of The Judge, that Optimus, Wheeljack, and Bumblebee were still in the Quintesson Tower when the Judge crashed into it and destroyed it. So we get a little flashback to end this episode explaining how Optimus, Wheeljack, and Bumblebee survived that, where basically with the tower coming down and the Judge crashing through it, bringing it down, Optimus, Bumblebee, and Wheeljack see that the only way that they can survive is by jumping through the multiversal bridge. And I got really worried that this meant that Bumblebee, Optimus, and Wheeljack were going to be part of this finale event, and we catch up with them a few episodes down the line, maybe towards the end of the season. But no, thankfully they do appear throughout the next 3 episodes as well, and come back into the main universe by the end. So anyway, Optimus and Bumblebee, while carrying Wheeljack, jump through the multiversal bridge, and end up in this alternate universe where everything is like, it kind of reminds me of like, it's all these different like rotating staircases that reminds me a lot of either like Hogwarts, or that one movie or painting, I'm not sure if it's like MC Usher or Pan's Labyrinth or something like that. It reminds me, I forget the name of it, but it's like whatever that artist or movie is that involves like all the upside down staircases that are rotating all the time. It reminds me a lot of that. So they're stuck in this universe now with Wheeljack separated from the two of them, still unconscious, trying to figure out how they're going to get back to their universe. And that's how episode 14 ends. So with episode 14, the end of the universe part 1, I'm going to give this episode probably an 8 out of 10. I did enjoy the explanation as to how Starscream ended up becoming the new Quintesson Judge, and explains how the Quintessons got to Cybertron, though we don't know exactly when they took over Cybertron, if they took over a few months after the events of the Battle for Cybertron arc, a few years. We don't know how long they've been in control for. We just don't know exactly that. And there was, again, I'm not too fond of the whole Cup narrating the entirety of this event arc, so I'm going to take off immediately like a half point for every episode because of that. And especially, I didn't like, but other than that though, the rest of this episode was good though, so other than that, I'm going to give episode 14 an 8.5 out of 10, and now we're going to move to episode 15, the end of the universe part 2. Now we move on to episode 15, the end of the universe part 2, and honestly, I can easily say this is without a doubt the weakest part of the 4-part end of the universe event. Honestly, there are some few good moments of this episode focusing primarily on Windblade and McAdam, but most of this episode is just pointless filler that I really feel like that didn't need to be shown at all, and could have been better geared towards something like further showing off more of Windblade and McAdam's story. So that's what I'm going to cover the most up with this review, and that's because that's like the most fun I had with this episode. So this episode starts off with Lord Gnaw and all his other Sharkticons having taken over McAdam's and basically claiming that they're going to take over all of Cybertron, while McAdam is forced to serve them Energon. But at the same time though, Windblade comes in, and we get this really, really awesome moment of just Windblade tanking all these Sharkticons so effortlessly, and while McAdam watches. And I gotta say, after having seen Windblade be out of the action for most of this season, and she really got kind of pushed back to a side character throughout the later half of season 2, it's nice to see Windblade get a spotlight again, considering the last time we actually saw her really do some good stuff, like good fights, was back in, honestly, season 1. And as much as I hated those episodes in season 1, the Rescue Windblade arc had a lot of good moments for Windblade in season 1, like especially her versus Slipstream back in episode 5, Whiteout, or battling Slipstream and all the other Seekers back in episode 14, Siloed. Those episodes, despite my other problems with them, the fight Windblade had with Slipstream was great, and it's great to see Windblade get another spotlight in this episode where she just effortlessly dispatches all these Sharkticons, and thankfully when she gets to fight Lord Gnaw, she actually struggles with him, which I was really glad for considering how she got beaten by him back in the Judge as well. So it's nice to see that she's not just like gonna easily one-shot Lord Gnaw like he did, like she did with all the other Sharkticons before him. So Lord Gnaw actually puts up quite a decent fight with Windblade, actually managing to stab her in the chest briefly and injuring her, though Windblade does manage to get the upper hand and eventually defeat him. So, but McAdam doesn't help at all throughout the whole of this, which is my one problem. I understand maybe he doesn't help battling like all the Sharkticons, but when it's just Lord Gnaw left, couldn't McAdam have just stepped in to help just a little bit, or did his little like future sight basically say, oh no, Windblades can take this, she'll get stabbed in the chest once, but it's fine, she can handle herself. That's just something that kind of bugs me a bit in my opinion. But anyway, after defeating Lord Gnaw, Windblade talks to McAdam where she reveals that she's come here to awaken Iaconus, and McAdam states that he can't deny it anymore and that he is going to allow her to essentially awaken him, and saying that many city speakers again have died trying to restore Iaconus, which we saw again back in the Judge when, was it the Judge or I believe it was the Alliance actually, when McAdam had previously stopped Windblade from fully awakening Iaconus. So Windblade and McAdam head down to Iaconus, battling several other Sharkticons and Quintesson drones along the way. And I gotta say, one thing I really do like about this is that to show that these Quintesson drones and Sharkticons are under Starscream's control, they're all painted to have Starscream's colors, like especially the drones too. They have Starscream's red, white, and blue color scheme with a little bit of yellow dash in there as well. I actually love that little attention to detail. So while Windblade and McAdam are making their way to Iaconus' face, where we saw her try to interact with Iaconus in the past episodes, Windblade wonders how they're going to activate Iaconus considering all the mental strain it put on her back in the Alliance. So McAdam explains that when they last sealed Iaconus, several other citizens of Iaconus ended up sacrificing themselves to put together some sort of psychic trap inside of Iaconus to prevent any city speakers from waking him up, though he tells Windblade that she already has everything she needs to make it through the trap. So with that information, McAdam holds off any remaining Sharkticons and Quintesson drones while Windblade goes to awaken Iaconus, and that basically leads to where Windblade is again inside Iaconus' mind. And it's great to see like Windblade inside someone else's mind again, because the last time we saw this was back in Season 1 where she was constantly going through Bumblebee's mind, and Iaconus' mind is totally different. We see all his memory panels are just all fractured. The whole interior area looks like a big storm instead of just the peaceful blue aura that we saw in Bumblebee's mind throughout most of Season 1. So Windblade is struggling to figure out how she's going to awaken Iaconus when suddenly a big yellow dome traps Windblade in, and she's unable to get out of it, but is able to, thankfully, by using her sword to cut through the barrier. And when I saw that, I was thinking, this is it, really, McAdam? Your big psychic trap to prevent any city speakers from getting into awakening Iaconus was to put a bubble that could easily be broken by a weapon. Now, I guess you could argue that it's because Windblade has her Stormfall sword, that maybe the sword has a special property in it that lets her cut through the bubble that any other normal weapon wouldn't. You could argue that, but just to me, the fact that the trap is just a bubble that prevents you from breaking out of it, that just seems a little underwhelming to me. But regardless though, Windblade does manage to speak to Iaconus and convinces him to fully awaken this time, as McAdam defeats the last of the Sharkticons and Quintesson drones. And while that's happening, we do get some little minor bits with Starscream basically pestering all the Autobots and Decepticons still being held in the stadium as to where Optimus and Megatron are. We get a little arc with Bumblebee and Optimus trying to get to Wheeljack in the alternate like Pan's Labyrinth universe. And again, I'm so sorry if Pan's Labyrinth is not that movie I'm thinking of, but it just reminds that if you know the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But it reminds you of that. But again, they don't really amount to much. This episode revolves mostly around Windblade and McAdam awakening Iaconus, and the episode ends with basically RC and several other Autobots and Decepticons just trying to like lie to Starscream about where Optimus and Megatron are. So eventually Starscream gets fed up with this and grabs RC, saying that he's going to kill her if they don't reveal where Optimus and Megatron are. And just as they're about to reveal it, Iaconus wakes up and gets ready to attack Starscream. And so that's going to be it for episode 15, The End of the Universe Part 2. If I had to rank this episode, I would probably give it either a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. Again, it's not really a bad episode per se, it's just that aside from Windblade and McAdam freeing Iaconus, nothing else really of importance happens this episode, and I didn't really, could say I enjoyed the rest of it. But thankfully, parts 3 and 4 do make up for this, and we're going to go ahead and jump into it now with episode 16, The End of the Universe Part 3. Now, The End of the Universe Part 3 starts immediately where episode 15 ended, with Windblade awakening Iaconus. So, the whole stadium starts to shake as Iaconus emerges, and I gotta say, I absolutely love Iaconus' design, especially with how his visor slides down over his face. And so eventually, it starts off with Iaconus just destroying different buildings in Iacon, because he's clearly still corrupted after going insane, as McAdam stated back in, I believe, The Citizen. Though Windblade manages to direct his attention towards Starscream by projecting an image of him into his mind. So Iaconus starts charging towards Starscream with his big sword, and Starscream's just understandably so freaking out, telling the scientist that he needs to do something to help him out, but the scientist seems to be afraid, as he already has something planned. So after pushing a few buttons in his lab, a big comet comes out of the sky, lands right in front of Iaconus, and it turns out to be Quintesson, who has been essentially upgraded / brainwashed by a scientist who's covered in all these tentacles that have been consumed by tentacles that have been added by the Quintessons, and has just essentially turned Quintesson into his own personal Titan. And I gotta say, this is where the highlight of this episode comes in, with this big Titan fight between Quintesson and Iaconus, with essentially, I like to think of it as kind of like a Power Rangers fight, like a Megazord battle, with Windblade controlling Iaconus, and then Starscream controlling Quintesson. And it's honestly just like, reminds me of Big Stupid Fun with Power Rangers, where you have like this really like epic, loud, rock, like heavy guitar that's playing as Iaconus and Quintesson are beating up each other, and it's stupid fun. But like, honestly, unlike the touch montage back in the Alliance, I really do enjoy this one. As someone who hasn't seen like Power Rangers in a solid 5 to 7 years, it really made me feel like I was watching an episode of Power Rangers with how Quintesson and Iaconus were battling each other, and I really did find this funny. So while Iaconus and Quintesson are both fighting each other with Windblade and Starscream controlling them, Starscream of course leaves the rest of the Autobots and guns unattended, which gives McAdam enough time to sneak in and free everyone, which again, I'm really annoyed that we still haven't got to see what McAdam turns into yet, and we most likely never will, given how this episode ends, and that McAdam essentially is about to free Ellen Willow, and the Sharkticons come in and corner McAdam. So McAdam instead just ends up, again, transforming off screen, and we just hear him beating up all the Sharkticons as all the Autobots and Decepticons just watch him in awe. But regardless, McAdam manages to free all the Autobots and Decepticons, and even Hot Rod and Soundwave, breaking them out of their little Sea of Rust loop as well. And so while they're doing this, though, McAdam does something that I really don't understand, and that's essentially while Iaconus and Quintesson are fighting, McAdam orders all the Autobots and Decepticons to evacuate the stadium, when I think it's Iaconus that shoots a laser beam at Quintesson, who blocks it with a shield. And so the shield gets the laser from Iaconus gets redirected towards the stadium where McAdam is. And Hot Rod is seen trying to warn McAdam, telling him to leave with him. But McAdam states that his time has come, and just lets this laser ricochet off Quintesson's shield and hit the stadium, hitting right where McAdam is and killing him. And I don't understand exactly why McAdam just lets himself die at this point, because clearly, if Hot Rod just worked harder or McAdam just went with Hot Rod to pull him out of the stadium, McAdam could have easily survived. So, did McAdam just want to stop fighting and just let himself get killed? Is that the reason why? Because if that's the case, I don't know. Just McAdam's death just seems really forced in my opinion. I think it would have been better if maybe McAdam died saving Hot Rod. That would have been better. And with the fact that McAdam seems to willingly just give up and let himself get killed by Iaconus, I don't know, to me that just seems a little bit odd in my opinion. But anyway, after McAdam dies, we cut back to Optimus, Bumblebee, and Wheeljack, who are still stuck in the alternate universe trying to get to Wheeljack, despite all the staircases just constantly shifting and moving everywhere. So, with Bumblebee and Optimus just unsure of how to get to him, Wheeljack finally just wakes up on his own and reveals he just has a grapple gun that he uses to get to where Optimus and Bumblebee are. And honestly, despite it being funny, it just kind of makes this whole point of this whole little arc that we've seen of Bumblebee and Optimus trying to save Wheeljack from the alternate universe just feels pointless. Like, I feel like they could have just cut to Bumblebee and Optimus and Wheeljack just escaping the multiverse in this episode and just cut out the scenes from episode 2 with them in it. It just seems pointless. But anyway, Wheeljack reactivates the multiversal space bridge to bring them back to their universe, but instead of ending up at the Quintesson Tower because it got destroyed at the end of the Judge, they are now in the scientist's lab, who basically deploys all his bodies to essentially try and kill all 3 of them. And we get this great little final fight with Optimus, Bumblebee, and Wheeljack battling the scientists, and despite all them able to take down the bodies so easily, there's just so many bodies coming out of nowhere. So Wheeljack eventually does a little scanning and figures out where the scientist's true body is hiding, and that's under like these little floorboards in like, I think it's in the floor or somewhere like on a sidewall. Wheeljack goes in there and finds this absolutely horrifying little gremlin Quintesson that's controlling all the scientists, and that's the true scientist right there. And I gotta say, like, immediately that's honestly like one of the scariest things that I've seen in Cyberverse so far. Just like this little demon baby thing, worse than the big baby fetus thing that you chase through the dollhouse in Resident Evil 8. Reminds me a lot of that. So Wheeljack is just staring in horror at this little baby that's just like looking up at Wheeljack, and it's like, and by tiny I mean like it's really tiny for Wheeljack, but despite that, it's still really scary. So when Wheeljack does it, he actually kills the scientist by just crushing him with his fist. Of course, we don't see it happen on screen, but we can hear Wheeljack bring his fist down the scientist, and there's a really audible squish. And then that happens off screen as you just see all the scientist bodies just suddenly drop dead after Wheeljack killed the scientist. And damn, Wheeljack, you just committed murder. But honestly, I'm here for Wheeljack taking a more proactive role in this. So, but anyway, after they deal with the scientist and now the scientist is dead, they turn their attention back to Starscream, who is focused more so on helping Croatan win his battle with Iaconus. And this is where the ending of this episode comes in that I was really, really surprised by, and honestly gives this episode a lot of positive points in my opinion, and that's the ending. So, with this ending, Iaconus seems to be getting on the upper hand with the battle against Croatan thanks to Windblade, managing to knock Croatan down and bring his sword ready to stab it through Croatan. Though just before he can do that, Starscream opens up a portal to Unspace above Iaconus, which oddly resembles, honestly, the portals from Oxenfree, in my opinion. And again, I'm really excited, actually, for Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals that's coming out in just a few months. And I know I still did finish my Let's Play of Oxenfree 1. Again, I do have the footage. I just need to go ahead and actually record it, actually, like, edit it all together. I just kind of lost interest in editing it, but I'll be back to that before Oxenfree 2 comes out. But anyway, so after Starscream opens this Oxenfree portal to Unspace, he just directs like a bunch of Unspace to come, and it wraps around Iaconus' head and literally just rips it off. He literally just one-shots Iaconus by ripping off his head and sending it to Unspace, and my jaw just dropped just with how sudden it was that Starscream just immediately took out Iaconus like that. And I did not expect Starscream just go ahead and one-off Iaconus that quickly. I really, really thought that maybe the Autobots have to destroy Iaconus after they dealt with Starscream, or that maybe Croatan and Iaconus would kill each other during the fight, not just have Starscream just effortlessly kill Iaconus like that, because that was pretty crazy in my opinion. So after Starscream just kills Iaconus, Iaconus shifts back, or his body shifts back into his city form, and all hope just seems to be lost as Starscream is getting ready now to basically now take over, destroy the entire universe. And it's just really, really crazy that Starscream was able to kill Iaconus that quickly. So that's gonna be for my review of episode 16, The End of the Universe Part 3. This episode I would probably give an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10. I really did enjoy the fight with Iaconus and Croatan, with Windblade and Starscream piloting them, sort of like Power Rangers almost, like Megazords. I really enjoyed that. And even like Iaconus' shocking death at the hands of Starscream was really out of left field and totally surprised me, and I was really enjoyed like just how sudden and brutal it was. But again, there were some minor things I had problems with the episode, like again, Starscream, or well, not Starscream, McAdam's death at the hands of Iaconus just seemed really like forced in my opinion. Bumblebee, Optimus, and Wheeljack's adventures in the Pan's Labyrinth universe just seemed weird. Again, also, I really liked Wheeljack killing the scientist just so brutally, and just having this big reveal of the scientist's true form being just this tiny little fleshy Quintesson. But anyway, that's gonna be it for this episode. We'll move on now to the final episode of the End of the Universe event, episode 17, the End of the Universe Part 4. And this is honestly a really, really good episode. So we've now come to the final part of the End of the Universe event with episode 17, End of the Universe Part 4. And this episode picks up just a little, like, I'd say probably like a few minutes after the events of Part 3, where Windblade is unconscious inside of Iaconus's decapitated body, which is now transformed back into a city. And she's just unresponsive until Laserbeak somehow managed to get to Windblade and wake her up and lead her out of Iaconus, where she sees Croaton heading towards Starscream, getting ready to eliminate the rest of the Autobots and Decepticons. So Windblade tries to reach out to Croaton through her speaker powers, trying to speak to him, but she's just not getting through to him until Laserbeak manages to find a way inside of Croaton through, I believe it's like his shoulder or something. So Windblade manages to slip in there with the help of Laserbeak, but we'll get back to them later on in this episode. For now, though, we're going to cut back to Starscream with all the other Autobots and Decepticons. So after Starscream killed Iaconus, he rounds up all the Autobots and Decepticons again, getting ready to kill him once more, until Bumblebee, Wheeljack, and Optimus appear and get ready to fight them. But Starscream just deals with Optimus easily, shooting him in the chest once and knocking him away to everyone's shock. And Starscream's about to go ahead and kill Optimus for good this time, when suddenly another multiversal portal opens in the sky, and a huge purple shuttle just crashes through the portal into Starscream, who just barely manages to catch it and save himself. At that same time, though, a figure jumps out of the shuttle and lands on the ground next to Optimus and everyone else, where we see it's surprisingly Megatron. And I knew Megatron would be coming back later on this season. I just didn't think it would be this early. And I gotta say, Megatron clearly throughout this these past 3 episodes has clearly taken my advice to heart that I gave him back in the Judge about how I said that Megatron was a selfish brat. Now this Megatron, though, he's clearly learned some humility and awareness at this point, as he's got the scars to prove it. His whole body is totally like covered in battle damage. He's actually got a brand new arm that has like a spiked shoulder pad. His fusion cannon's been updated, and of course he's actually missing an eye at this point. But Megatron just clearly has seen some stuff, and I'm not going to take any points off of this, because maybe we'll get an episode later on in Season 3 that explains what happened to Megatron in between the events of the Judge and this episode. Maybe see what he's been doing at this point, because clearly Megatron's been through a lot, as he starts glowing purple all of a sudden and manages to do some damage to Starscream with his odd purple power. So he states that he's been traveling the multiverse for years now, presumably, even though it's only been about probably like less than an hour in our main universe, and he's picked up on several new powers and abilities during his time as a multiverse. So with Shadow Striker, Soundwave, Bumblebee, and Optimus all surrounding Megatron shares that power that he's gained from his travels throughout the multiverse with them, and we get this really, really epic scene of Megatron, Soundwave, Shadow Striker, Bumblebee, and Optimus all battling Starscream's drones and stuff, making their way to Starscream. And honestly, I gotta say, I really, really love just like seeing how I was so wrong about Megatron, that clearly he's been through this sort of paradigm shift of himself throughout the past 3 episodes off screen. Hopefully we'll get to see it in a future episode where he's finally learned to be like a true leader for the Decepticons and not just abandon them, as he's helping Optimus and everyone else fight for Cybertron, which I really wish we would have seen back in the Alliance, but hey, never say never. So we finally got that, and I really gotta say, I love Megatron's new design, and I love just how this awesome moment of Bumblebee, Shadow Striker, Soundwave, and Optimus alongside him all juiced up on this extra power that Megatron has gained to battle Starscream's minions, and it's really, really cool in my opinion. There's even this really cool point where after, I forgot to mention this, back after Wheeljack killed the scientist in Part 3, when the scientist died, all of these sound waves he collected just suddenly reactivated and began to fight as well. So we get this really cool point where Bumblebee and Soundwave are battling all of the other sound waves, and I think this happened back in episode 3 where all the sound waves just overpower our main sound wave. But now that Bumblebee and Soundwave are powered up by Megatron's multiversal abilities, Soundwave does like a super sound wave that manages to kill all the other sound waves. And though it is hampered a bit by the fact that Soundwave has to crack another Soundwave superior line, and we get it, Soundwave, you're superior, whatever you're fighting is inferior. You've said this maybe like 5 times throughout the past 5 episodes. Please get some new material. Anyway, though, after that, we cut back to Windblade inside of Croatan now, trying to talk to him again, and she does actually manage to get through to him this time, only to find out that the Quintessons have taken total control of his body, which I don't understand considering that the scientist is dead now, so no one should really be in control of Croatan, unless you could say that Starscream is in control, because he's technically a Quintesson now. So I could go with that, saying that Starscream is in control of Croatan now. So Windblade is inside Croatan's mind when she sees, like, all the different tendrils that are surrounding Croatan's mind. So Windblade decides to use up all her power and basically splits herself into, like, 5 separate copies that destroy all the Quintesson influence inside Croatan. This, however, seems to either kill Windblade or put her into some sort of comatose state where she basically gets split up into all these different, like fragments of herself that go spreading outside of Croatan. And I do know now from out of context stuff and stuff I've seen online throughout the years that this is what the next arc of Cyberverse Season 3 is going to go about, that all the Autobots and Decepticons are going to work together to try and find all the bits of Windblade to bring her back to life. Though, again, it is a little unclear here, but I'm not going to take any points off of that, just a little nitpick in my opinion. But it is cool that Windblade sacrifices herself to save Croatan, and he manages to break free from Starscream's control and just leaves the battlefield with Windblade. Presumably, we'll catch up to them in the next episode. But anyway, we get to the end of this episode, which is really, really cool, and it's with the Megatron and Optimus now staring down Starscream, who is just all alone now with the fact that Croatan has left the battle with Windblade. And so Megatron and Optimus decide they have to kill Starscream here and now, and Megatron actually shows pity for Starscream here, stating that he finally realizes just how poorly he's treated Starscream throughout all of Season 2, and even before that, throughout the flashbacks we've seen in Season 1. And it's cool to see Megatron finally come to this realization, but that he does feel like he needs to kill Starscream to set things right. So we get this really, really cool reveal where Megatron states to Optimus that they need to work together to kill Starscream. And to do this, Megatron opens up his chest to reveal that his multiversal power comes from an alternate matrix of leadership inside his chest. So technically, Megatron is a Prime now, and honestly, I find that really, really cool, and I hope that that we find out in a future episode just how exactly Megatron got the matrix of leadership and became a Prime, essentially. I'm really, really interested in seeing how this, and I really hope that Cyberverse does do this at some point. So Optimus at first is wholly in shock that Megatron has a copy of the matrix of leadership, but doesn't dwell on it for too long, as together with his own matrix of leadership, Optimus and Megatron release like a dual energy wave of Megatron's purple matrix of leadership and Optimus's blue one, and it sort of converge into this double energy beam that consumes Starscream, presumably killing him. And yes, that unfortunately though, as much as I love Starscream, Meg Cat, one of the head writers of Cyberverse, did confirm that Starscream did in fact die this episode, though apparently that wasn't always supposed to be the case. That originally the plan was that Starscream wasn't supposed to die, and that he would emerge from his Quintesson judge body with amnesia, having no idea who he was, and getting a sort of redemption arc with him possessing a shard of Windblade. And honestly, as much as a sucker as I am for Starscream redemption arcs like the IDW comics, I do feel like Starscream in Cyberverse was just too far gone, and that considering that he literally killed all of his Seekers and went through the whole power stunt of him going through the Allspark's power and just all that, I feel like just Starscream in Cyberverse was just too far gone for a redemption arc. I just feel kind of like a cop-out if he just got a redemption arc after all the horrible stuff he did. So, as much as a Starscream fan I am, sorry, tongue twister, as much as a Starscream fan I am, I do feel like it was the right thing to kill off Starscream in this episode, and I feel like he did do a good job as sort of a main villain back in Season 2, and they did redeem him after having his wasted potential in Season 2, just have him come back as his big main villain for the first half of Season 3. So, kudos to Cyberverse for redeeming Starscream, and you gave him a great finale, in my opinion. So anyway, after Starscream is killed by Optimus and Megatron, peace is finally returned to Cybertron, with Optimus thanking Megatron for saving all of them. Though he does wonder, though, if there's some sort of ulterior motive that Megatron has planned, as the shuttle that Megatron had lands, and it's revealed to be Astro Train, actually, or this Cyberverse's version of Astro Train, who we never actually seen in Cyberverse yet. Astro Train in Cyberverse is huge, that he's like this big shuttle that all the Decepticons can pile into, and that Dead End was piloting throughout the throughout this whole episode, I forgot to mention. But anyway, as Optimus and Megatron talking again, Optimus asks Megatron, like, if there's any sort of catch to Megatron helping Optimus. And so Megatron just states, though, that there may be, like, a time when he does ask that Optimus comes help him with something, but for now, he just wants half of Cybertron to himself and all the Decepticons, and that if the Autobots respect his boundaries, then there will be peace on Cybertron, to which Optimus agrees. And it's kind of cool now that we do have this sort of tentative peace on Cybertron, now with Megatron and Decepticons owning one half of Cybertron, and Optimus is half owning the other. I'm pretty sure that there is going to be maybe, like, some sort of, like, tentative peace now, and considering that we do know the rest of Season 3 is going to be about, basically the Autobots presumably trying to find a way to save Windblade with maybe some help from the Decepticons. I'm really interested to see where that goes, and this was just an incredible ending to an otherwise sort of, like, mediocre or above average 4 episode events that I'm really glad that this final episode saved it. And so, that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 3, Episode 17, The End of the Universe Part 4, and the entirety of the End of the Universe event as a whole. If I had to rank Episode 17, I would easily give it probably either a 9.5 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10. I'm willing to ignore the usual half-point takeoff for Cup's narrations, considering he only narrates, like, twice throughout this whole episode, and it's very minuscule compared to the other episodes. But everything else was so great. Megatron coming back with his brand new body, having the Matrix of Leadership, which tells immediately that we're going to get probably get a really cool story with him in the future, explaining how he got the Matrix of Leadership and had this change of heart with Decepticons. His battle with Optimus, Shadow Striker, Bumblebee, and Soundwave all battling all the Starscream's drones and the other multiple Soundwaves. Optimus and Megatron working together to kill Starscream. Windblade sacrifice to save Croaton. It was all just so good, and I'm glad that Cyberverse was able to stick the landing with its finale at least. But that's going to be it for this review. We still have quite a few episodes to go, though. We actually have about, I believe, about like 8 to 9 more episodes to go of Season 3, despite the Quintesson arc being over. And we'll continue this again with Episode 18, Enemy Line, very soon. If you like this review, you should like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Take it away, Bumblebee.
Bumblebee out.
And I might know our future, but then you still control the past. Only you know if you be